God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic. And welcome to Unapologetic. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Ramsey personality, certified financial coach, and one of the first guests I ever interviewed, Rachel Cruze. You may know her as Dave Ramsey's daughter, but Rachel has a personality all of her own, obviously, when it comes to helping you manage your money and get financially fit. She's also the author of 3 #1 best-selling books and hosts the Rachel Cruze Show and Smart Money Happy Hour. She is so fun, so wise, so smart. She's one of my favorite people to listen to, follow, and speak with. Don't change the channel just because we're talking about money. It's also about contentment, peace, joy, motherhood, marriage, so many fun things. I promise you will leave so hopeful. We also both work at the same place as our father, which should be its own episode. Let's help welcome Rachel to the show. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Julia. It's so good to see you again.
I want to ask you what we start out asking everyone. What do you wish Christians would stop apologizing for?
You know, in my season of life right now, I would say spiritually, there's just something for me about loving people well where they're at, and I don't have to be the one that saves them. And so there's kind of been this like release from me just to be like, you know what, I just want to know people's stories and where they're at. And so there's that level of just, you know, even when I read through scripture and just see the red letters of Jesus and how he engaged people, how he engaged the Pharisees, how he engaged the sinners. And yeah, there's just something about just saying, hey, I just want to walk with people. And I have found sometimes the world or Christians are like, oh, it rubs them the wrong way in a sense. And so I just kind of am like, man, I just don't want to apologize for knowing people's stories, walking with them and loving them well. While following what scripture talks about. So that's kind of where my own personal journey, kind of where I'm at and figuring out that balance.
A lot of people in our generation know nothing about money and scripture. And so I just want to say, because like we are like Southern Baptist. I never say that. I hate that I just said that. We are
Own it, girl.
We are believers, saved by grace, who believe the Bible's true. But I've seen incredible things happen through giving and through, like, for me, like, I was so brought up in a certain way that anytime, like, even if someone, like, gave me $10, I'd be like, give one back, because I do not want to be under any kind of judgment. And then you have people that didn't grow up that way at all, and they're like, well, the verse says, be a cheerful giver. So, like, you have the total grace, no responsibility side, and then you have maybe terrified of, you know, just dying because you didn't get the dollar back. Right. And so, right. So I'm going to like let you talk about this, of course, but I just want to say, like, I have benefited from the idea that everything I have belongs to God, and that when I love this, Mark Batterson says that you can't outgive God. Like, anything you give him, he's not gonna be like, well, too bad, now you can't pay your mortgage. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, God's not mad at you for obeying scripture. So I just want to set you up to talk about, like, what are the benefits of spiritual principles about money? How does it go together? And you can tackle tithing if you'd like to.
There is plenty of content in scripture when it comes to money. And like you said, I think one of the biggest positions is understanding that we are a steward, which is another word for manager. We are managing what God has given us. And that perspective is so, so key because it changes the decisions that you make. When you're handling someone else's money, you do it with a different level of care. And if that goes from your head to your heart and you really own that perspective as a believer, it does change. And then it says, okay, let me go to God's playbook and see how does he want me to handle his money. And again, it's all in there. And so it's fascinating because I think that there is a correlation between what you do with money and the outcome you get. There's a lot of reaping and sowing in scripture. But when you look in the book of Proverbs specifically, there's a lot of scriptures with money. But the book of Proverbs is a book of wisdom. It's not a book of promises, right? But there are tactical things in our lives today in 2023 that we can do with our money that is biblically aligned and that you get a great outcome, right? I mean, it is true when you put money in an investment, for instance, over time, maybe not in a single quarter or even a single year, but over time, mathematically, you probably will make more money on that money that you invest because that's math, right? Like, so there's some common sense principles in this, but doing the practice of handling money God's ways can be really hard. And like you're saying, even with the giving, I mean, I practice the 10%, not as a legalistic thing. And I think that's what's key is don't make it legalistic, because what ends up happening is when you do give, it changes your heart. It changes your perspective. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get a brand new BMW sitting in your driveway that God just magically appears. But what ends up happening is you move on the spectrum of being selfish to selfless.
Mm-hmm.
And selfless people, they just naturally tend to prosper. Maybe not in a worldly, earthly way, but they prosper in their relationships and their parenting, at their work, because when you serve and give, just like Jesus did, you get a level of results where you love people really well. So again, the giving aspect, I just say 10% just as a line item with budgeting, regardless of where you are. It can be tied. It's obviously tied to the 10th, to the tithe. But again, I always say too, just give a little until you can give a lot. But the benefit of giving is re-owning my position that I don't own it. And it opens my heart in an emotional, spiritual way that I just believe a closed fist holding on to money doesn't give you. So those blessings can look all different ways, but there is something about the heart change that I think God is really after.
This is funny. This is just how my mind works. But like, I am like just more creative, like sitting there and thinking about like investing and stuff. I'm like, I have to make this like creative somehow. So if this helps you tithe, I think about it as I'm paying my heavenly mortgage. I'm like,
yeah,
give it. Yeah. Anyway, of course,
I don't want to be evicted.
I know.
So here,
I'm like, please get me in the best neighborhood. No, but I mean, I know like more the ministry side, like we would just say, whenever you're doing what you're supposed to do, you invite God's blessing, not his discipline. Like if we are not, and not that I'm perfect or anybody's perfect, but you do want to try to honor God and obey, because if you belong to him, he does, he loves us too much to disobey. And so you're inviting blessing, not discipline. Blessing could be in heaven, not necessarily being a billionaire.
Yeah, and I think, too, the beauty in that, Julia, I'm finding in my own life right now, that it's even just the obedience, right? Regardless of the outcome, because sometimes, in life, A plus B doesn't equal C, right? Like we do what we're supposed to. And so I've learned in my life, even recently, I'm like, just the act of obedience. When I feel like, okay, God, this is what you're calling me to, regardless of what the outcome is. Obviously, I would love a great outcome if that was in the works. But regardless of the outcome, you are who you say you are. And in that obedience, I develop a relationship with God that is so much more authentic and real in my own life through the act of just obedience. And again, I think there's cause and effect in our lives. And sometimes it's just God and he writes a story that we don't plan. But regardless of the resort, understanding that, I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm like, yes, as you're talking, I'm like, I totally feel that. Like, it's crazy.
Jesus talked a lot about rewards in heaven. Like, we aren't just all obeying because we feel like it. Like, there actually is a reward.
Yeah.
So anyway, I also just want to say this because I know you and I both grew up in church. Some people listening, like, if they think they have to study the Bible a certain way, I'm not going to say which way, they wouldn't even know where to find money principles because they're only doing a certain kind of study. So I just want to tell you, you literally can Google, what does the Bible say about money? And there's Open Bible, and I have no affiliation with them, but it's every scripture about money. So it's okay to do topical studies and things that you're interested in. Okay, so I want to ask you, we're running into problems with this cash system because of people only taking credit cards. Like, we are Ramsey people. We've had our envelopes and believe in it. We're running into problems living that out in daily life. Like, the valet wouldn't even take Ryan's $20. I was like, why are you giving $20? But anyway, like, they're like, we have to use a credit card. So can you just kind of speak to that? Because it's a wonderful, I don't think people, I'm sure you already know, but some people kind of think, well, it's not very practical. It wasn't practical for us last night. What do we do? Yeah.
Yeah. Any establishment that takes a credit card can run a debit card as well. So your debit card is still your money coming out of your checking account.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that's what we're finding more and more. And with the cash system, I always recommend the envelope system for people that first start budgeting, and just to say, hey, cash out 3 categories, 4 categories in your budget that you tend to overspend. The grocery store can be one, these places, and practice using cash, because what cash does is you have to exchange cash for the item that you want. But again, it's not going to work for every category. If you order pizza online, you're going to be paying online. Like, that's the world we live in today. And so making sure that you are still budgeting, what money you have in each category, which is really important.
It is kind of hard though, because I know, my training's as a therapist, and we want couples to know what's going on money-wise. It's good accountability. It's good bonding. It's good arguing material. So, no, but it's hard if you're doing Apple Pay or debit card. If you don't have the cash, what's just a practical way? Are you supposed to talk every day? How do you know what's happening?
Well, yeah, you can. You can, absolutely, right? No, so I have an app called EveryDollar, and Winston, I have the same login information. So EveryDollar connects to your bank account. So when you swipe your debit card at the valet, that transaction comes in, you drag and drop it to the category you want, and you keep going. So that's how we use the budgeting system, and we both have it on our phones. We both see it, and we share a checking account. So when I log in to First Horizon Bank, where our checking account is, I see all the transactions, and we talk about it if something comes up. We see so often today that couples just live on two separate tracks when it comes to their money, and it's one area of their marriage that you say, hey, I'll be one in every aspect of my marriage except for money. Usually from a pain point, usually out of fear of divorce. There's a lot of stories that wrap around why someone wants to do that. But what ends up happening is that mindset doesn't just stay within your money. That seeps into other areas of your marriage. So I always tell people, if you can share a bed, you can share a bank account. And if you can't, then I would start asking questions of why. Because usually it's not a money problem. Usually it's a trust issue. It's a fear issue. And there's something too, Julia, about we want to avoid money fights. That's another one I get. We kind of just laughed about that earlier. But they're like, we work better separate. And we don't have money fights anymore because we have two separate accounts and we do our own thing. And I'm like, that's the exact fight you should be having. You can't just sweep marriage issues under the rug. That's the thing that's keeping you from deep intimacy, is the thing that you're just avoiding on a tactical level. So coming together is key.
Practically day to day, when do y'all touch base? Because you don't want every night you finally get the kids to sleep. It's TV time. Do you touch base every day about finances?
No, we don't. We have our categories set up before the month begins, so we know exactly what we're spending in every category. And usually, honestly, I'm the one, which is funny because I'm more of the free spirit. He's a little bit more of the nerd in the relationship. But I'm the one, I just go in that app every day. It takes 5 minutes, and I sit there and, drag and drop Publix into groceries. We did Chick-fil-A, so put that in out to eat. And I sit there and kind of just categorize. And then we both can log on when we want and see how much we have left. And we will check it. even today, we're kind of midway through the month right now. And he even said, hey, how are we doing on out to eat? Because we're looking at our week and saying, okay, we're probably going to go out twice this week because of kids' sports and everything. So we'll touch base. It ends up being more because of life, right? We're looking at calendars. We're thinking about dinner. So it's not this big, huge, scary conversation all the time. It just ends up being in the ebb and flow of life.
I do want to talk about two things. One, I'm just going to throw them out there so that maybe you can help me come back to them. No. Don't we need a credit card to build credit? Why in the world, if you're traveling, wouldn't you use the Chase Sapphire or whatever? And then also I want to just kind of ask you about different day-to-day ways to stay focused, because we have social media, of course, keeping up with the Joneses. How do we enjoy our life, which I know that you care very much about. You have a wonderful book and journal, actually, that I do called Contentment, the Contentment Journal. So we'll end with that, but let's go ahead and talk about this idea that you need a credit card to build credit.
Yes. So that is true, though. In order to build credit, that's one way that you build credit. But the reason why you build credit is to go deeper into debt.
Wow.
So your credit score mathematically is all calculated through debt. It's the new types of debt you're taking on, how current you pay your bills. It's a algorithm. It's a mathematical equation of debt. So the only way to have a credit score is to have debt. And the biggest pushback I get with the credit score is a mortgage, because a mortgage is the one type of debt I won't yell at you for. But you can do what's called manual underwriting, and you just have to have proof that you are on a job for 2 years and proof that you pay all of your bills, like cell phone, electricity, water, utilities, all of that, just proof of that for 2 years. And most mortgage brokers or mortgage companies will banks will underwrite you the mortgage. So any other reason you need a credit score, you can get around. You can rent an apartment without a credit score. You can get insurance without a credit score. You can still live life without a credit score. And I've found that it is so much. There's a freedom there when Scripture says the borrower is slave to the lender. That's just to say, hey, I'm not gonna put on a lot of consumer debt. We're not gonna go into debt for stuff that we can't afford, and so we're gonna spend our money / God's money, right? It's His money that I'm managing, and so I'm not going to go into debt for it. So I don't have a credit score. Winston and I don't have one as a couple, but we've been able to do everything you can imagine. And a lot of people use their credit card, though, for the points, to get the airline miles and all of that. And honestly, Julia, I mean, debt is not a sin. It never says that anywhere in Scripture. You don't have to get to heaven, and if you have a student loan, God's going to second guess you. Like none of that's going to happen. But it is this system that we have played into, especially as Americans. And for me, the whole point system and the airline miles, banks make their money off of interest. That's the biggest business that they're in, and they make interest. You pay interest when you don't pay your debt in full every month. And so for me, taking airline miles or credit card points, even if I pay my credit card off every month, I don't have one, but right, if that was the case, that's what a lot of people say. I'm like, yeah, but you're benefiting off of the backs of people in America that are struggling, that don't have the money to pay their credit cards every month. And they're making banks multi-billion-dollar industries that are putting people deeper into debt. So for me, I'm like, I don't even want to play in the system and play in the game. So I sign up for Southwest and I get their frequent flyer miles and I call it a day.
This is a way that you and I did both grow up. But some people, they're hearing this for the first time. They're going to be like, what is she talking about? I've never even heard that. And you're going to go look up all the Ramsey and all the Rachel Cruze stuff. And it's amazing. But people may feel a little defeated because they're like, well, I didn't know any of this. So is it too late to start? What kind of encouragement do you have for people that are like, well, I'm too far gone, or I didn't know any of this, or I'm too old? What would you say?
Yeah, money, it can be a very shameful, embarrassing, regretful type subject in our lives because unlike anything else, it has a number to it. And what ends up happening is our net worth has become our self-worth in today's world. And so you have to break that idea, that identity that your money mistakes or what you have in the bank, the amount of debt you have, the income you earn, that is not who you are. That cannot be where your identity is. But yet we live in a world where it's pushed and applauded that that's where your identity lies. So you do have to break that because that will break the shame and the guilt over all of it. Now, do we want to learn from our mistakes? Yeah, absolutely. And if you're not happy with where you are financially today, that means you will have to change the way you've been handling money to get a different result. And that's going to be uncomfortable at times. But it's encouraging because anyone can do it, Julia. Anyone can. And being in this job for 13 years, I have heard every story you could imagine.
Can you just tell us some of your stories? Because I follow everything that y'all do, and I've read most of your books.
No matter who you are. I mean, I met a single mom at our event in Indianapolis, and she paid off $35,000 in 2 years as a single mom. And I'm like, look at that. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And then we have people that come in and do their debt-free screams live on the Ramsey show. And again, you get single. There was a single guy last week. He was 24. He owed he owed $16,000 to his parents for a student loan, and he paid it off in 6 months. He's like, I just never went out to eat. I got an extra job, and I just did it. So again, regardless of the amount, you have the ability to wake up and make different decisions with your money. And I want that for you. I don't want money to be a stress point. I don't want money to be the thing that you lose sleep over. And that's where a lot of Americans are today. They don't have money saved. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And it is such a burden and a stressful way of living. So I want you to break from that. The number one step is the belief that you can.
Yeah.
And that's the correlation we see with people that interact with our stuff and actually make progress is they believe that they had the ability to wake up, make a different decision with their money, and they actually start seeing progress. Some slower than others, but it is possible.
I want to end with motherhood stuff. Since the last time we talked, I had triplets. So I had triplets. Just overnight, we became a family of 5, and that formula was insane. And I remember, I love clothes. This is way too much information. I love clothes, but all I could think of was, these are our only kids. Why would I ever buy them anything nice? There's no more. And who is this going to? And which That's not me. So I just want you to talk a little bit, and then like even going to the zoo, like with all of us. And I just want you to talk about a little bit about motherhood and what it's like having social media and just really kind of how to balance that and sift through. I wasn't jealous. I was just like, that is like impossible for us. And I mean, of course we have Keeping Up with the Joneses, but now it's social media. So can you just kind of do an encouragement for moms and realistic expectations?
I would say the most freedom to give yourself as a mom when it comes to the tactical side of money, again, is going back to the budget. I go back to it, but it's true because I have a line item for each of my kids in there. And I'm like, that amount of money in there is for the kids. And when that amount of money runs out, I'm done spending on them for the month, right? I mean, so it's the zoo, right? If you go to the zoo for the afternoon, it's if you're going to the water park with your kids, the splash pad, and it's $3 per kid or whatever it is. But just keeping track and allowing yourself to enjoy it in the moment because you've already done the planning financially. So you already know what you can do. So you can actually go and enjoy the moment. And you're not second guessing every single purchase and every single thing. And then for me, it's a helpful boundary that I know as the month is going on, I'm like, all right, the last week, money's running out. So we're gonna have to figure out something else to do. It's like, all right, kids, let's play the fairy tea party out in the yard and we're going to play for free and do what we have to do. So it can be difficult as a mom. And I would just want to say, mom's like, you're doing a great job. I think it's so easy to get so discouraged. And again, you see what the clothes those kids are wearing. My kids look homeless 75% of the time. So I'm like, it's not worth me. They want to wear a certain thing. I'm like, you know what? Go girl. It's not going to ruin you. You do it. I'm fine. Because I have figured that out, Julia, in motherhood. I don't know if you're like this, but so much of what I put on them is my own insecurities. And so I've had to kind of detangle some of that and realize, wow, I'm more worried about that for you because of me. And I'm like, I'm going to step out of the way and allow this to happen. So it's a full life that we have as moms, but yeah, it's hard sometimes.
Okay, can you just give us your best advice that Dave Ramsey ever gave you?
I think one of the biggest things, I think this is true in every area of your life, including your money, is you have to do things on purpose. You have to be intentional with your life and the life God has given you. And usually, again, it's not 100% true, but usually when you're intentional with something, you're going to see progress on the other end. And that's true with your marriage. That's true with your parenting, your friendships, your money, your work, everything. And I think it's so easy just to kind of sit back and just let life happen. I think there's seasons of rest and seasons for listening and all of that, but an overarching theme of saying, hey, I want to do this on purpose and just be aware of what's going on in me, what's going on in my heart, what's going on with my motives, my desires, like understanding all of it and doing life on purpose is so helpful versus just sitting back and looking up 5 years later and being like, where'd all my money go? Or like, oh my gosh, like what's happening? There's a level of intentionality of working on yourself and areas in your life and even spiritually, right? I'm like, when you're intentional with time with Jesus, like it's different. It's different than just sitting back and hoping, things are going to happen or hoping you're going to have this deep, wonderful, authentic relationship. Like there's something about putting forward. It's great.
I have to tell you, because we did Dave Ramsey's steps as newlyweds, and we got married when we were 20, and like couldn't go on a honeymoon. Like we didn't care at all about money. We just want to be married, and we lived in this really ugly apartment. And then we found out like 2 weeks later that someone had to eventually do the laundry. Like we were kids, and there was something different. I have noticed this being a therapist. There's something different in a ministry when you get married, because Ryan and I, and of course, like everybody's story is different, but being married young, like we were just both eating at McDonald's, and then one day we were able to go to Mi Casina. Like we were always together. I've heard, I wonder what advice you have here, that a lot of people I know that get married later in life, or it's their second marriage, they have fear, or just kind of just a little jaded. And then later in life, they've already made their own money, or they have a very hard time sometimes merging. What would you say, like, just kind of to that, I mean, they've done well, or they haven't done well, or they're hiding debt, or, they've had like 10 years of being an adult without a spouse?
The couples that we see that see each other on the same team and see each other as, hey, our money is not sitting in between us, but it's out here, and together we're locking arms and we're going after this money goal, whether it's getting out of debt or saving up for a vacation, but together we are in this together. And that doesn't mean you completely strip your identity of who you are. There's still a Rachel line item in the budget, and I go and do the things I want to do with my amount of money, and he does too with his. And it's, you can still have your individuality, but I think it's the perspective of seeing each other as a team and not the enemy. Start digging in and asking why. What is causing me to be hesitant, to be truthful with the money that I have, the debt that I owe, merging bank accounts? Because again, it's usually not about the money. There's deeper things going on there. So keep asking that why question, because I think it's going to get to the root of a lot of things that will bring a lot of intimacy ultimately when you can start connecting that. And then out of that, working together with money almost just seems like the byproduct when you get underneath that foundation.
Can you just tell us about like how people can connect to you and what y'all are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can go to RamseySolutions.com for a lot of content on there that's free. So make sure to just check that out. We have different podcasts, The Ramsey Show, The Rachel Cruze Show, Smart Money Happy Hour. That's all on podcasts. You can listen for free. I'm on social media, so you can check that out, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, all the things. And yeah, and different books and products and classes. Financial Peace University that you mentioned earlier is a great class to dive into. And it's all online based now, which is great and easy and convenient for people. So yeah, there's a lot of resources, a lot of materials out there. So make sure to check it out, because again, our hope is to walk beside you and give you the tools and the instructions and the pathway to make it easy to understand. Sometimes it's hard to do, but giving you that step-by-step plan to hopefully be able to say, gosh, my money is not controlling me anymore. I'm actually controlling it. And there's something powerful in that.
Well, that was a wonderful sign off, but I have to say the best advice I ever heard Dave Ramsey give, because it haunts me like all the time. So it was, you can't out earn bad habits. And it wasn't like a scripture, but something just clicked. And I just think that he is so wise, and luckily has you to work with him. And we just really appreciate all that you do. But anyway, in closure, just remember, everyone listening, it's never too late to start over. God cares about your money. It's not legalism. It actually creates a lot of freedom. And I love ultimately what the Ramseys teach is that once you have reach these goals, you have margin to give, and to give to ministries, and to go pour into other people's lives. I mean, you can do that before, but then you have like money to actually help people do it. So it's a very hopeful, very encouraging program. All right, well, thank you, Rachel. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Unapologetic. Remember that you can hear today's episode and more at ptv.org/Julia and wherever you get your podcasts.